Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is Monday night, April the 18th. I'm glad to be here. I just want to do a reading from my book, Veta Juvies, and this is in honor of abused children. It is for the month of April, the National Child Abuse Awareness Month down in the United States. I was planning on doing this and just really thought tonight would be a good night to do it, and just decided suddenly about 2 hours ago that I would do this tonight. So it's rather just a spur of the moment thing. But I wanted to read from Veta Juvies and wanted to do it this month, so I figured tonight's a good night to do it, and so hopefully everybody will get something out of this. This show, it is graphic. I don't think it's for younger children. I think that younger children should not be listening to this show or any of my shows. I'm talking about child abuse, but it's such a sensitive topic, and it's a scary topic. And so I would say that this show is graphic. It's for older, teens or even young adults or adults, right? So it's definitely not for younger children. It is graphic. So my books are written in truth. It's my story. These two books, A Life of Death, The Redemption, and Veta Juvies, were published last year. And Donnie Shear, Sandra Potter from Dreamcatchers for Abused Children saw my blogs and saw my work and really thought that it should be published. It should be out there for people. And so I think it's just awesome. And I just want to thank them very much for believing in me personally, for believing that my story was worth telling and worth getting out there. And I think my story is not special. Like I was talking about that on Friday night with doing a reading from A Life of Death, The Redemption. My story is not special. There's no, there's so many children around the world who have lived through worse, and died in worse, right? And so, my story is not special. I'm just glad to be able to have a format and a platform to be able to work through. And, I just wanted to be one more voice. And in doing so, I wanted to tell my story. And it is just one typical story of children who I knew growing up who were abused. And I don't, myself, everybody that listens to my shows knows all about what happened to me as a child. So, I just wanted to present it so that the public, and people, survivors, would be able to relate and have some validation. And other people who may not know a whole lot about abuse would be able to get a good look at what happens in families and what happens to children who are being abused and don't get any help, right? So that's why I wanted to do that. And so it is graphic because I decided to keep it very, just truthful, right? And the truth, it hurts sometimes, you know what I mean? And the truth is disturbing, right? That's why child abuse is such an issue, and it's always swept under the carpet. Nobody wants to deal with it. It's too disturbing, right? Well, my life was really disturbing, and it wasn't my fault, you know what I mean? My parents chose to create a disturbing life for me and my siblings, and a lot of my friends were abused. And so this book really is one summer that a group of us were hanging around on the street I grew up on, and I changed the names in the book. I changed all their names. I changed my name in the book for this one. A Life of Death, The Redemption, I actually kept the names the same, but this book I wanted to change the names. And it's because I couldn't get a hold of any of these people. These are my old friends. Many of them are just who knows where they are. I can't locate them. I don't know where they're at. I've tried to find them, and some of them are dead, murdered, killed. So it's kind of sad. But their stories are important, and I hope that everybody will get something out of this. All of our stories are important, whether we've been abused or not. I find that people's lives are worth it. They are important. Everyone has an important story to tell. And so, this story, like I said, is not special. It's just one more story. And I've read I love to read about people's lives and people's stories because, to learn about what people have been through and what people have gone through and to see what makes them who they are. And so I'm going to just read from my book tonight, Veta Juvies. And this book, I donated this book to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children as well, as A Life of Death, The Redemption, because I didn't want the money for these books because they are my story, and I couldn't take the money for these books. It just bothers me to even think about it because of the abuse that I went through. People would say, oh, well, you just wrote your story so that you could make money, because that's what people always say about people that write their abuse stories and their stories of their pain and their blood and their tears and their agony and their suffering and torture. People think that people write their stories for money, and I thought, no, this is just not about the money. It's about abused children everywhere around the world, and I just wanted to be one more voice out here to really be a voice for them as well. And so it's called Veta Juvies, and I'm just going to get started right now. So I just want to remind everybody who's just tuning in that it is graphic and that it's not for younger children's ears, right? So this is definitely not for young children, and it is graphic. So if the show upsets you at any time, the book upsets you, please turn the show off. That's your discretion. You have to listen to all of my shows at your discretion, because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, very sensitive, and it does offend people that are not used to hearing about it. I grew up in it, so I'm used to it. I lived my whole life in it, and having to deal with the aftermath of it and from it. So I thank everybody for being here. I had Gypsy Witch here and Maisie, and I just love you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate it. So we're going to start Veta Juvies. This was published last October, and I had written it. It didn't take me very long to write because it's my story, and I just had to write down a few events, It didn't take me that long to write it because it's just bringing back memories, and this was one summer with my friends, right? So I'll read the foreword. Innocence lost. Can we truly lose something we never had? Can an abused child lose their innocence? My answer to this question would be no. How can a child lose something they never had? How can a teenager, for that matter, lose their innocence when they never had a chance to be an innocent child? The inspiration for this book lies in my heart, my memories of my friends, and how much we all wanted so badly to be innocent. And the hard fact was that we all knew it was impossible to be something we were not. Most of my friends growing up had been brought up in the same types of homes as mine, abusive and dysfunctional in every way. We were often out on the streets running around the neighborhood like a gang, and even had our own official name, the Veta Juvies. I'm absolutely positive that if any of the old Veta Juvies see this book, they will know it is about us. I have changed the names of my friends and myself, and this story is our story. Like my life now, I hope that their lives have been filled with peace and goodness. I wish them all the best and thank them for being my friends at a time when I needed them so badly. Without them, I don't know if I would still be here today, as they showed me unconditional love and care, protection and kindness, and were there for me when my own family was not. They provided the love that my own family could not show. The Veta Juvies were my family and still are to this day. Love and peace to them and to all who read this book. Chapter 1. Shh, keep your head down. The grass was damp and cold, and I was laying face down, as motionless and as still as I could. Searchlights from the police car beamed over our heads. I dared not breathe as the cruiser was at a crawl. The searchlights moved slowly past us. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Joe and I laid there for a few minutes to make sure the police car was far enough up the street before jumping to our feet and bolting down the street. Ha ha ha, we laughed, looking back to make sure there were no other police cars in the area. Just minutes before, Joe and I had been hanging out on the block. It was pitch black, and all was quiet when we saw a police car cruising the neighborhood, headed right for us, when Joe whistled as loud as she could, and then proceeded to flip the officer the bird. We ran hard as the police car did a U-turn in the middle of the small intersection. We made our way to the next street and found a yard with uncut grass and jumped face down, hoping we would not be caught. We had done it. Yeah, we are the Veta Juvies, we shouted and yelled at the top of our lungs, hoping to wake up the neighborhood. Veta was the name of the street I lived on. Joe and I walked casually up the street back to my place. You going home? She asked. Yeah, I gotta head in, I guess. I'll walk you to the end of the block, I said as we made our way up the deserted street. The only light was a street light at the end of the block. You okay to walk the rest of the way home? I asked. Joe said she was fine and they better stay clear of her or she would kick their ass, meaning anyone who happened to come along to bother her. Joe lived 2 blocks up, we parted ways. I made my way back down the street. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I wondered what I would be walking into when I got home. No one would notice as I closed my bedroom door and turned on the light. Taking my freak jacket off and kicking my shoes into the corner, I turned my stereo on and laid down on the bed, rolled over, and fell asleep. Chapter 2. I woke with a start, sat upright, looking to see what time it was. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I had only been asleep for 2 hours. My dad had come in my room and was tearing down my posters. I sat there watching him rip them off the wall. Devil music, devil worshippers, he yelled as he ripped them up and threw them on the carpet. I started to say something when I used my better judgment and let him continue on. I muttered under my breath, they are not devil worshippers, it's just music. He turned and looked at me, eyes blazing with anger and hatred, and I knew I better not say anything else as it would not be in my best interest. You are what is wrong with this family. You are the cause of this family's problems. You are evil and of the devil himself. I remained silent and sat motionless on the bed, trying to control my mouth. I knew what would happen if I argued back, so I took it, waiting until he had his say and left my room, closing the door as he went out. I fought back the anger and muttered under my breath again, crazy asshole, got up, turned off the light, and staggered back to bed. 10 o'clock in the morning came around, quick. I turned over and looked at my posters ripped to shreds on my bedroom carpet. Oh well, just another day, I thought as I got up and made my way to the bathroom. Passing by the kitchen, I could see my mom sitting in her chair at the kitchen table, book in hand, and a cigarette burning away in the ashtray. All was quiet, and the only noise in the house was the air conditioner. It was hot, and it was only 10 a.m. I had a quick shower and went into the kitchen to grab some breakfast. "How are you?" I said to my mom, who did not look up from her book. "Fine," she said with a smile, taking a drag off her cigarette. "Need anything done today?" I asked, hoping she would say no. "No," she said, continuing to read her book. My mom loved to read, and she read as many books as she could get her hands on. It was her only escape. She could go anywhere and be anyone as she read those romance novels where the characters were from ancient times, kings and queens and damsels in distress, or southern belles with southern gentlemen coming to call on her, charming and polite men who knew all the right words to say to a lady. I grabbed my bowl of cereal and went into the living room, sitting down on the sofa. My dad came into the living room and glared at me as he went by. How dare he come into my room and ruin all my posters? I liked those posters, and they were not evil or devil-worshipping bands. I avoided his gaze and continued eating my cereal. He went out the front door to water the lawn, and I finished my cereal and headed out to find my friends. It was Saturday morning, and I thought about how much I loved summer. Chapter 3. I walked down the block, smiling as I saw my friends sitting on the sidewalk. "Hey, what's up?" Joe was there, as well as Chris and the usual crowd, my two friends who lived across the street from me, Mitch and Ellen. We all decided to go and look for some weed. None of us had any, and we all wanted to get high. Chris and Mitch took off on their bikes to go and look for some pot. The rest of us hung around, talking about what we were going to do that night. "Hey, Steph, did you get in shit for coming in late?" Joe asked me. "No, but my dad ripped down my posters last night," I said. "That's the shits," Joe responded. "What a jerk," Ellen added. "Yeah, it sucks," I said, watching Chris and Mitch riding up on their bikes. "Score," they yelled. Jumping off their bikes, we all headed to Mitch's backyard to light up. We walked around the side gate to the backyard. Mitch's mom was at work, and his dad would not be home because he had been murdered years before. 2 teenagers stabbed him to death as he chased after them down the alley. They were attempting to steal 2 10-speed bicycles from the backyard, and Mitch's dad yelled at them and ran after them as they rode down the alley. They got off the bikes and stabbed him in the neck multiple times and took off. He managed to crawl out of the alley to the street where he died. My sister and her friend happened to be driving by just after he crawled out on his hands and knees and laid in a pool of his own blood on the street. They phoned the ambulance and police, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead on the scene. I remember I was over playing at Mitch's house that day, those years before when it happened. My mom had called me home to tell me to watch Mitch and his younger brother because there had been an accident and Mitch's mom was going to have to go to the hospital with their father. I knew he had been stabbed, but did not tell the boys as I babysat them. I tried to reassure them that it would be okay and their mom would be back. Mitch and I had a special bond because of that, and we used to hang out a lot as children. "What's the plan for tonight?" I asked, passing the joint to Joe. "Nothing, just hanging out," was the general consensus. Just then we heard glass shattering somewhere on the street. It sounded like a car window had been shattered. We all bolted out the side yard gate and onto the street to see our friend John running up to us with a bat in his hand. "Some dudes just busted that car window," John said. We all looked at him and the bat and said, "What? You're the one with the bat in your hand." "It wasn't me, dudes. No way. I was just coming over to see if you all want to hit some balls. I did not break that window. Some dudes in a car did it," he tried to convince us. We all took his side when the neighbors phoned the police and they questioned us about the incident. We told them that John was with us the whole time and we were playing baseball in the backyard when we heard the glass shatter and ran out to see what happened. John had a record and was on probation for minor offenses. His mom did not care about him, or his dad for that matter. They were divorced and had their own agendas and did not care what happened to their sons. After the policeman made the report, we all went back to Mitch's and rolled some more doobs and hung out. This was looking like a decent summer after all. Chapter 4. I walked up the driveway to go home later that evening. I went into the kitchen to scope out some supper, noticing a pot of chicken and dumplings on the stove. I heated some up and noticed my mom was lying down in her makeshift bedroom, a tiny room that could have been used as a storage room or a small dining room. "Are you okay?" I asked her, speaking softly. She did not answer. She was like this lately, either sleeping, reading at the kitchen table, or yelling and screeching at me for no apparent reason. On the bad days or nights, she would throw in a slap or a backhand or a beating for good measure. My parents had never gotten along since before I was born, and their marital problems were just getting worse. I took my soup into the living room. Turning on the television, I sat down and started to get into the show. I heard a knock at the door, and as I opened the front door, a string of firecrackers went off. Bang, 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 bang. I was surprised and laughing, but my mom, who had been lying down, was not so happy about it. She came charging out into the living room, shouting, "Damn kids, go home! Rotten kids," she shouted. I went out into the front yard to tell them all we better leave my place and go somewhere else. My mom slammed the door behind me. "You guys suck," I said. "Sorry, Steph," Joe laughed. Mitch and the gang laughed. "Your mom is pissed off," Mitch said. "Yes, you guys suck," I said and began laughing with them. We all took off to go and roam the neighborhood. "You're in for it tonight," Joe said as we walked side by side up the street. "I don't care," I replied. "They don't need a reason to kick my ass. Doesn't matter to me," I said. We all went and hung out at the park 2 blocks away. It was a hot summer night, and I was glad to have my friends. Later that night, we all headed home. Joe offered to let me stay at her house if I wanted to. I had spent quite a few nights on their couch this last year. "No, it's okay, man," I said, walking up my driveway. "See you tomorrow," Joe said. I opened the door and went in the house. My mom was waiting up in the kitchen. "I want to talk to you," she said to me as I was going in my bedroom. I turned around and went into the kitchen. "Your friends are troublemakers, and especially that Joe," she said with a tone of anger in her voice. "Joe is cool," I replied. "I don't care what you think, you stupid piece of shit," her tone changing from mild anger to full-on anger. "I don't want you hanging around with her. She's a slut and a whore, and so are you," she started to yell. I knew I was in for it, so I stood up for my friend, knowing that I was going to be in trouble either way. "She is not a slut. I am not a slut," I said loudly back to her. I was standing in the doorway, as that was always the safest place to be in any room with my mom. I started to back up and out of the kitchen when she stood up and threw her cup of cold coffee at me, cup and all. "I knew you were going to cause me grief," she shouted. I had ducked but could not get out of the way of the cup or the coffee, and was now waiting to see how this was going to unfold. "You piece of shit," she screamed at me. "All you kids just cause me more problems and more grief. You can see how sick I am, and the way your father acts around me and trying to force himself on me. I can't get any help here, and now you think you're going to start your shit with me," she continued to scream. I did not answer her, and decided I would be better off to not say a word. "Maybe she will let this one go tonight," I thought to myself. "Not another word," she glared at me. "Not another word out of your goddamn mouth, or I will knock you into tomorrow." I could feel my body tense up and my asshole slam shut. I remembered the beating I had taken from her a year and a half before that could have killed me. I did not say another word and turned and went to my room, careful not to slam the door, and sat on the bed. What did I do? I knew I was not a bad kid. I knew I was not a slut, and for her to call me my best friend that name really hurt me. My friend had it rough at home, tough at home as well, and she was doing the best she could. Joe was good to me, and I cared about her very much. No tears came to my eyes. Those tears were all cried out years before. I just sat on the bed, hating myself, hating my life, and hating my mom. Chapter 5. Sitting on the trunk of my dad's car in the driveway, I watched across the street. Joe ran over to me and whispered, "We're going to go into Ellen's house. No one is home, and I know where her mom and dad's stash is." "I don't want any part of this," I told Joe. "Not me. Don't include me in this. My parents will kill me for sure if I get busted, so I'm out of this." Joe looked across the street at Mitch and a few of the other kids we hung around with. "We don't care, man. We're going to go in through the window, and we are not going to mess with anything. Just going to grab the weed, and that is it," she said, trying to solicit support. "I'm not going with you," firmly. Joe started to walk back across the street, looking back at me. Said, "Can you keep a lookout to see if they are coming home? And if they do, will you come and alert us if you see their car?" she asked. "I'll keep a watch out, but I'm not involved in this," I said. A few minutes later, they all came running out from the backyard. Joe was carrying a duffel bag and handed it to me. "You have to stash this for me, okay?" I looked in the bag. A bottle of tequila, cash, cassette tapes, and jewelry. "I don't want to keep this at my house," I said. "Man, you know what will happen if my mom finds this shit." "She won't find it," Joe said. "Come on." We went into my bedroom and stashed the duffel bag and went back out to get high. "Think anyone saw us?" Joe asked as we sat at the park, smoking the joint. "I don't think so," I said, passing the joint to John. "Her parents suck." Mitch said, "I agreed." Ellen lived across the street from me since I was born, and we did not like her parents. They were very strict with their children and did not like us. They were always throwing me hateful looks, as they knew how my parents were, had seen the cop cars, ambulances, law enforcement officials coming to our house for years. They heard my parents screaming at each other and screaming at us and not like our family. "My mom told me she did not want me hanging out with you," I told Joe. "Fuck her," she said. "Remember the time she kicked me out of your house when she was kicking your ass and I told her to stop hitting you? I remember that Joe had told my mom that there were laws against child abuse, and my mom made her leave our house. Your parents suck, she said, passing the joint to me. I took a drag and held it in, looking at her. Yeah, that's a fact, I said, laughing and brushing it off. Chapter 6. A few days went by, and I did not think about that duffel bag with the bottle of tequila and stolen property that was stashed in my bedroom for safekeeping. Joe and I met on the street. Go get the bag, she said. Yeah, I'll go get it. I went back into my house and went into my bedroom. Closing the door, I went to the clothes closet and peered into the back of the closet where the duffel bag had been stashed, and it was not there. I panicked. Oh, shit. Did my mom find it? I thought to myself, this is not going to be good. I went back out on the street and told Joe that the duffel bag was gone. What? She said, no way. What happened? Did your mom find it? She asked. I don't know. She hasn't said anything about it, so I don't know. But if she did, she will kick my ass. Just tell her you found it, Joe replied. That sucks, man. All that for nothing, she added. Mitch and Chris came running up to us. It was early in the day, and we had all day to hang out. We did some SID, they said. Double-dip snowflake acid, Chris added. I had been using drugs for years and had done some hallucinogens before, but not this type of acid and not double-dipped. We were all in. We went to Mitch's house because his mom was at work and not to be home until later that evening. We all dropped the acid and not too long after started to feel the effects. It was not long before Joe started to have a bad trip. She was staring into a mirror, looking at herself and freaking out. It's not me, she kept saying over and over. It's a lie. All of this is just a lie, she kept saying over and over again. I was experiencing my own trip and thought I'd better see if I could calm her down. Chris and Mitch were freaking out on everything in the living room. Common household items suddenly became very interesting as they changed ships and moved on their own. Joe was having a bad trip, Chris said, laughing his head off. I know, man. Just leave her alone, was my advice, as she was not listening to me, as I had been trying to talk to her and make sure she was okay. This went on all afternoon, and it was not looking like we were going to be coming down anytime soon. I don't remember going home, but at some point I must have gone home because I woke up the next day and went into the kitchen still tripping and hallucinating. I got the cereal out of the cupboard. In the bowl, poured the cereal into the bowl, went to the fridge to get the milk, and put the milk on my cereal. My mom was sitting at her place at the kitchen table. She did not look up at me, and so far I figured I had it all under control. I concluded that I must not appear to be on drugs, and as long as I could keep it up, I should be able to pull this off. I put the milk in a cupboard and the cereal in the refrigerator. My mom said nothing. I said, hi, Mom, and went into the living room to try to remain in control. I was still tripping, and this was day 2. 3 days went by before I started to come down. My friends were all okay, and Joe was fine. We all met up at Mitch's house and laughed about that acid trip. 3 days, Joe laughed. I was frying for 3 days. Me too, I replied. And Mitch and Chris said the same thing. I did not like that experience and was thankful that my friend Joe was okay. I had seen what drugs will do to a person, as my older brother was a drug addict and had to leave the country because he was on the lam from the FBI and other law enforcement. I told him if he did not leave the country, he would be sent to prison, so my parents bought him a one-way plane ticket to Canada. He had left the year before and had been on drugs since he was a young boy. After seeing him nearly die from numerous overdoses, I knew what drugs could do to people, and yet I used them myself to escape the reality of the abuse I was suffering at home, escape the reality of my parents' inability to love each other, to love us, their children, and their failure to care about any of us. They only cared about their own needs and their own emotions. We were not allowed to have any emotions or feelings and had been battered and abused for so long. The only way I could cope was to escape. Just as my mom read her novels to escape, I chose drugs as an escape, and my view of myself and my childhood ate at me constantly. I felt worthless. I felt unloved. I felt evil and bad. All the things my parents told me over the years had finally made their mark. They literally pounded into me how much they did not want me or love me. I took drugs because in my own mind, it was the only way I could survive in that home. Chapter 7. John walked up to where we were all sitting. He had a fresh red welt on his face and tears in his eyes. What happened? I asked him as he sat down on the curb. My mom hit me, threw me out of the house, he said, looking at us with a look of embarrassment and a half grin. That sucks, man, Joe said. Yeah, it does suck, I added. She was pissed off because she said my bro and me are not helping her around the house. We try, he added. That is just not right, I added. It's not right what your mom and dad do to you either, Joe said, looking at me. It's my life, I said, looking down at the pavement. It's bullshit, Joe stood up. What do you guys want to do? John asked if he could use my phone. He needed to call his dad and ask him if he could stay with him for a while. I told him he could use our phone. Both my parents were at work, so we all went into the kitchen while John phoned his dad. Shortly after, my dad came home from work and walked into the kitchen. Seeing us all sitting there, he pointed to the front door. "Out! All of you, out now," he said, motioning to the front door. My friend stood up looking at me and then started to head out to the living room. "John is just using the phone," I said. "He can get off the phone right now and get out," my dad said as he came around the kitchen table. I was backing up against the sideboard. "What? He's just using the phone," I said, half flinching already, and he had not even reached me yet. He grabbed my arm, squeezing it hard, and pushed me hard up against the cabinets. "Those punks are not allowed in our home," he said threateningly. "Okay," I winced as he was hurting my arm, squeezing harder until I cried out. I thought for sure he was going to beat me up, but he let go of my arm and walked out of the kitchen. I joined Joe and the gang outside in the front yard. "Your dad is a jerk," Joe said. We all agreed and headed off to the park. After hanging around for a while, John decided to go to his dad's place and left us. We all headed home for the night. Joe invited me to her house. Her mom was an officer in the sheriff's department. She was a real sheriff, which I thought was so cool. I liked Joe's mom and thought she was cool. She was a good mom, but had never been able to pick the right type of men to have in her life. She was divorced from Joe's dad, who was an abusive alcoholic. Joe had told me about some of the things that would happen when she was growing up and how her dad had beaten up her mother and sent her to the hospital a few times, and how he had beaten her and her younger sister with a belt many times in a drunken rage. I liked her mom, but she sure did not know how to pick her boyfriends. One bad relationship after another was not enough to think that she should not allow herself or her children to be abused. She was now dating a guy who had just gotten out of prison. He was often at Joe's house and seemed okay, but I did not trust him for a minute. I did not trust any adults, but especially ex-cons. Chapter 8. I did not want to go home that night. The last 2 weeks had been bad, and it just seemed to be getting worse. "Can I sleep on your couch tonight, Joe?" I asked. "Sure, man. You know where the blankets are if you get cold." Her mom agreed that I could stay the night. I did not call my mom. She would have been so bent out of shape, as she had told me not to hang out around with Joe anymore, and if she knew I was staying the night at Joe's, she would have killed me. She would not care if I came home anyway, as she had been threatening to put me in foster care for the last 3 years. I had a plan. I would wake up early and get home before she woke up. This way she would not know I had not been asleep in my bedroom all night. Sometime after midnight, I curled my legs up on the love seat and drifted off. The next morning, Joe's mom was getting ready for work. I could smell the coffee brewing in the kitchen and sat up, stretching my legs out for a minute. Joe's mom was in the shower, and Joe and her sister Melanie were sound asleep. I headed out the door to walk home. It was a quiet summer morning, no traffic on the streets yet, and the light from the morning sun was just starting to break over the horizon. I loved this time of the morning. The cool air felt good. As soon as the sun did come around, it would be replaced by stifling heat. The temperatures in New Mexico this time of year averaged 105, hot enough to melt the asphalt on the streets. I made my way up my driveway and quietly opened the screen door, then the front door. As I closed the door behind me, I tiptoed to my bedroom just off the living room and closed the door. I had made it. One was up, and I decided to try and get a few more hours of sleep and make it look good. I don't know why I was concerned, as my parents did not come and check on me in the middle of the night. My parents did not come into my room at bedtime and tell me they loved me or say goodnight. They had never done that. But my dad was famous for coming in my room in the middle of the night to do things like he had done a few weeks before, tearing up my posters and calling me names. I wondered if he was really all there when he did those things, as he was having one of his psychotic episodes, as most of the times when he was behaving strange like that was in the middle of the night. My dad was quite often screaming and shouting in his bedroom at the devil or the demons that were attacking him. I had listened to that my whole life. It used to scare me, but now I knew it was just his own problem, and the only thing that bothered me was that one day he would snap and kill us all in the middle of the night, as he had quite often threatened to do. Oh well, I thought to myself, rolling over and stretching my legs out. If they know I did not come home, what does it matter? They don't care anyway, and what are they going to do? Beat me, I thought? Kill me? Doesn't matter. Let them kill me. I don't care. I drifted off to sleep. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate everybody who's tuned into the show, and this book is, all the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I hope people will purchase a copy, and, this book is really, written in honor of all children everywhere around the world who've ever been abused, and all of those children right now who are being abused, and all the teens out there who are on the street who have nowhere to go. Have a great night, everybody. I just keep you in my heart, and I'll keep you in my prayers, and thank you so much for being here and tuning in and being a part of my healing journey and being such comfort and a peace to my life. Thank you so much. Have a great night. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and then the rest of the week, check my show page and whatnot. I'll be doing another reading on Friday night from A Life of Death, The Redemption, continuing on with Chapter 4 in that book. I want to do some more reading in that one as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Take good care.